Hi, everyone. This is Matt Gray, joined by Dr. J. We're on the Childfree Life and Money podcast here. This is our inaugural episode, so kicking it off, right? And we're going to make it pretty simple today, actually. We're just going to be talking about our stories getting into child-free, the community itself, but also what kind of led up to that, why we are child-free, and maybe it can relate to some people out there and what stories they have. So to kick it off here, Dr. J, maybe give us a quick introduction of yourself and kind of where you are now, what you're doing now, and then on the tails of that, yeah, maybe start sharing a little bit about your story of, joining and being child-free and joining the community.
So Matt, is this the therapy couch we're on? Like, am I supposed to this one time in my life or how?
Whatever you want, Dr. J. I mean, you're the doctor here. I would say whatever you want to do, but I think we're just curious as to, what are some of the examples of stories that have led people to get into this lifestyle and this approach to life?
Yeah. So me and my wife, we are child free. That goes without saying. It's interesting to me, everybody has a different path. For my wife and I, when we were dating, I found out she had a 50-50 chance of dying if she got pregnant. And that kind of made the decision kind of easy for us to a point, I'm not going to take that chance, but it's been really interesting watching people's reaction to it. Some of our family were supportive. Some of it are like, you're crazy. Some people are like, hey, well, you could work with doctors and take a chance. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not taking
Yeah.
It's like, but the interesting thing to me is everybody has an opinion. Everybody has an opinion about what you should do with your life. And, we jokingly call it the life script. You need to get married, have kids. And we got married and people are like, why? If you're going to not have kids, why bother getting married?
Right.
And there was this moment, I'm like, well, because we love each other, they just got to, and they're like, well, but so, all right, this one's a little kooky. My wife grew up Catholic. Okay. I grew up Protestant, and she wanted to get married in Catholic church. Sure, no problem. I wasn't worried about it. Go to meet with the priest, say, hey, we want to get married. And they say, yep, you have to agree to have kids and raise them Catholic. I said, yeah, we'll raise them Catholic. We're not going to have them. And they go, oh, no. You have to have kids and raise them Catholic.
Interesting.
We actually went to 3 churches. I went to the one which she grew up in, could not get married in the Catholic church because we were child free.
Wow. I didn't realize that was a thing for the Catholic Church, although I guess I'm not totally surprised, and not to go into the politics and religion side of it, but them having a bit of aversion in some areas to contraceptives, not a huge surprise, I suppose, that there would be some opposition there.
Well, I mean, this was 12 years ago, so it might be different now, but I mean, it was shocking to us, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, yeah, great. You guys can get married, just not at our church.
Right. Yeah. That's pretty.
So how about you, Matt?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was raised probably similarly to you, Protestant household, very much so kind of taught the life script of, I always say, you grow up, you go to school, you do the best you can as a kid. You probably do some extracurriculars, I don't know, sports or band or whatever it is. And you graduate from high school, you go to college, get your degree. Most parents won't say it out loud, but they probably don't want you to study English or something. They probably want you to study something more, what they would deem as productive, which I did. I studied finance and economics, did the whole thing. And as I got older and older and more educated, I started questioning the life script a little bit of well, why does it have to be done that way or this way, so on and so forth. And I was pretty much out of the Protestant circles by the time I went off to college or early within college. And then the whole idea of having kids, I was very much so of the mindset of I'm not even close. That's way down the road. And that thought kind of stayed with me. I never moved beyond that thought. And then I got to the point in my mid-20s where I was like, I'm pretty much leaning no. The only reason I would have kids at that point is if it was a deal breaker for a significant other in the future. And then the final straw is when I was diagnosed with kidney failure in 2019 and found out that I have terrible genes, for one, and 2, I know that my own life is going to be shortened because of that diagnosis. And the medication I'm on means that there's a high risk of birth deformities and things like that, and learning disabilities, physical deformities, stuff like that. So there's like similar to your wife's story, like there are a lot of risks, not with my own life necessarily, but with someone, an unborn person's life, what their life could turn out to be, which may be horrible. So I think that was the final straw of me already being 80-20, no, not going to have kids, and then got the diagnosis like, all right, 100% no, not having kids. And I think once I realized that, it fit like a glove, kind of like, oh yeah, well, I mean, I guess that's the obvious choice, and it's been the obvious choice this whole time, even before I got sick. So I'm glad I found it, because it's what fits me in my life best. Like I don't have the patience for kids. I don't want kids. I don't particularly like kids. And I think I was kind of convinced, maybe not convinced is the right word, but kind of like kept the thought of having kids alive with a lot of the bingo things of like, oh, but when they're your kids, you'll like them, or you know, someday you'll want someone to take care of you, or whatever people say. And I was like, yeah, maybe I will. And then now I've realized like, no, that's all kind of bullshit. So got past all that, but that's really what my path was. I think a lot of people know early on, and they're like, oh, I was 14 and I knew I didn't want to have kids. And for me, it was much more of a slow burn, kind of tilting towards no more and more as time went on. And now I don't know, I would say 110%, but I'm speaking to an academic. So I'm 100% no on the kids thing. There's no such thing as 110%.
Well, so when I was doing my research for my book, Portrait of Child-Free Wealth, I interviewed 26 people from around the country, and I asked them why they chose to be child-free. And there was like a wide range where it's like medical, personal, like, you know, maybe they have medical issues like you're talking about. Maybe it's a personal, like behavioral trait, other things they didn't want to pass on, trauma. Some people were, you know, around climate, politics. I mean, all different range. But what was interesting to me was the amount of people that said, I never realized till later in my life that it was a choice not to have kids.
Yeah.
There's like this aha, like, I don't have to. Now, if you want to, that's okay. If you don't want to, that's okay too. I'm very much kind of a libertarian approach of, I don't get a vote in their life. They don't get a vote in mine. You know, whatever anyone wants to do, that's their choice. But it was amazing to me how many people, you know, and you and I just had something similar going, well, something happened in life. We're like, oh, I guess we can not have kids. And it's like, And I don't know why it's such a like weird thing not to have kids. Okay, so I'm the academic, and I'll give you stats. A study out of Michigan found that 27% of adults self-identify as child-free. And the definition they used was don't have kids, aren't planning on having. So 27%. And the census found that 11% of the adults over 55 are child-free. So we're talking about huge, huge percentages, but yet like, we're like the one group you can still pick on, or like, well, you'll change your mind. I mean, could you imagine saying that to another minority group? You'll change your mind. You would never say that.
Right.
But to the child-free community, it's okay. I don't get it.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up the whole idea too of like, you had an event where then you went, oh, child-free isn't genuinely, it's not really an option for us. It's not a sensible option. So now you kind of accept it and you're like, oh, this is great. I wish we would have just independently had thought of this earlier. It almost seems like in your case and in my case, there was this unofficial permission given due to health things, where it's almost like, to your point, like we all have the freedom to not have children, but even for us mentally, we almost needed this catalyst to be like, here's your permission. You don't need to have children. Here's something that happened to you or is in a situation that you're in. And I wonder if like other people out there kind of have this feeling of like needing permission, almost like, oh, I was going to have kids. I was expected to have kids. My parents would have been really upset if I didn't, carry the family name or whatever the random things that people come up with. But I mean, can we declare people have permission to not have kids here and now? They hear this, this is your event of permission.
Hey, if you have that power, man, I mean, let's go ahead and do it. But when I was hearing your story, I thought of someone I interviewed, Ryan, and he's in my book, it's Ryan A. And definitely child-free, all his life, always wanted to be child-free, married somebody, they were child-free, and then his wife changed his mind. And I said to him, I said, well, what'd you do?
Right.
I gotta ask you that question.
Right.
And his answer was, well, we tried. And the reason is, he said he'd rather be miserable than have her be miserable. Now, I mean,
Wow.
those are his words. And he said, well, I can work from the office, so we could pay for our nanny. They had enough money they could afford it. He said, I'd rather be miserable. Turns out in the end, they actually had some fertility issues. So they didn't end up having children. And I said to him, I said, do you have any regrets? Kind of, he's like, no, it worked out fine. But like, for me, I'm interviewing this guy and I'm like, I have no clue what I would do if my wife changed her mind tomorrow. We actually check back with each other frequently on that one. But it's like, okay, dating child free, that's a whole other world. I've been married for too long. Maybe you can figure that one out. But I mean, like we just have to figure out the what's compatible baggage or not.
Right.
And what's a deal changer or not. And I think a lot of people, kind of like your story, were fence sitters. They like, I could have kids, I could not. Depends on what my spouse wants. I don't know. And then there are those people that are like, I have people in my book that at 21 got their tubes tied because they're like, nope, decided never having kids. I'm just clear. So I mean, it's a range.
Right. Yeah, completely. So this book, you've mentioned it a couple of times, like where can people find your book or look into that? Where would they pick that up?
So since we're launching the podcast, I decided I'm going to make Matt pay for it, but you can get a free copy of the ebook at childfreewealth.com/book. You can actually download it. I will just be billing that to Matt every copy. So as long as Matt's okay with that, we're good. You can also pick up the audiobook in the paperback everywhere books are sold.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, I know. I've read the book. It's fantastic. And I think it's great that it's exactly what the title is. It's portraits of people who are child free. So it's kind of like we've done today and given very quick snapshots of our own stories. They're really compelling stories, to your point, of all these different reasons people have decided not to be parents. And to your point, medical things. And there's some things as simple as, I just didn't want them. I like my free time, and things like that. There's all kinds of reasons, but I think there's something there to relate to. I wouldn't say everyone necessarily, you always have outliers, but nearly everyone would find someone in there and be like, that's basically my story, or that's so close to my story that you'll find in the community of the child-free community as a whole. You're going to find people that are quite a bit like you and have very similar backgrounds. And I think you really shine a light on that in your book.
Absolutely. And the bonus, Matt, is we're going to be able to pull data out of that when we're doing these podcasts. So I also did hundreds of surveys with child-free folks because I wanted to understand, I've got my own personal experience, but I'm a researcher by nature. I wanted to understand what everybody else's experience was like. And it's not everyone literally, but, a lot of people across the country. And it's funny. In the end, I asked the question, what does child-free wealth mean? And the answer was, I have the time, money, and freedom to do what I want. That's it. Doesn't mean you're rich. Like some people have very little money, but you have some money, but you have the time, money, and freedom to do what you want. The hard part now is, okay, now what? And that could be a little, analysis paralysis routine, but hey, we're all there and we're not that weird. Like there's a lot of us out there. We just don't talk to each other yet.
Some of us are pretty weird, Dr. J. I'm just going to say.
Hey, call me out like that. But
yeah, I think it's a good point that the time, freedom, and potentially resources as well, money, things like that kind of come along with it are pretty compelling reasons, but also are oft mentioned reasons as to why people kind of have pursued the lifestyle and then didn't want to become parents. So it's quite normal. We definitely see it growing more and more in the US as well. I can't really speak to international populations, but I think it's kind of growing there as well in quite a few areas. I think even in China right now, they're like they used to have like the one child policy, and now they're like trying to get people to have more children. So I think it's becoming quite prevalent. And I think a lot of these issues are pretty common for a lot of people. So it's becoming more and more mainstream. Where can people go to find content or like resources or groups of people who are also child-free in their areas or virtually?
Yeah, so I've been having a lot of fun diving into the communities. So there's a child-free Reddit, which Reddit is an interesting beast. just the whole community, and it can get a little challenging. Let's call it that. I'm trying to be polite about that. There are, of course, some Facebook groups for child free that actually just recently we had the Child Free Convention. There's actually the Childless Collective Summit. There's a bunch of different groups doing this out there. And if you start Googling the words child free, childless, you'll see people have different definitions, and that's okay, whatever fits you. But there are communities. And Matt, I heard you actually started one in your local area.
Yeah. So we just had an event a couple weeks ago at this point to really kick off the group. It's a really young group, and we had something like 18 people show up to our first event here in Denver, which is where I'm based. And to think that you launch a group and in a couple weeks, you have enough people to generate an 18-person group. And that's just the people who could attend. I think the amount of people who have joined the group has surpassed 100 at this point. So the community is out there. There are people looking for that. And in Denver, my group is called the Denver Child Free Social, is what you can look into and find us there. But I think there's a lot of local organizations now, or even like informal groups that get together quite a bit, but as well as the ones you mentioned, Child Free Convention, things like that, that are more of the national level, or trying to get out there pretty vocally that way. So yeah, I'd encourage people to look for local groups, because I think you'll find yourself at home quite quickly. Even in the small group that I'd met with a couple weeks ago here in Denver, it felt that we were sitting around a table for 5 or 10 minutes before the whole group was chatting and laughing together and sharing a lot of those experiences that you're hoping to achieve. But and again, not to pick on parents, you just find it more difficult to get with parents and your friends who have become parents. Their schedules are a little bit more full and they've got all these things to do with the kids. Being able to find people in your community who don't have kids also helps a lot, to have someone you have a fundamental similarity with, but then also, typically, broad strokes here, have a slightly more open calendar and might be able to get together a bit more often.
Well, and I think it matters by area. So my wife and I, because we're both PhDs, we moved quite a bit. We just recently moved 1,200 miles, and we moved to Mississippi. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to get the same turnout as you are if I do a child-free group in Mississippi. It is.
Right.
When I was in the Northeast, yeah, I could have done the same thing. When I was in the Midwest, everything was around family and kids. So I think it matters where you are and the community you're in. I think you're right. Denver, you're in a good place, and you probably got a little more open discussions and things, and that's okay. But it's interesting because parents rely on play dates and other things to get together, and PTAs, and we don't have those.
Right.
So we have to make our own communities.
Completely.
And depending on the community, I'm here in Mississippi, and I kind of have like hush hush. Oh, I do child free stuff. Like it's kind of like it's not politically correct to do that. Mm-hmm. So I go more on the online side, because that's where I'm going to find the people that I can talk to and get to know and work through. I think the other thing is, let's be real, we're a little weird being the child free men. So you got the Child Free Girls podcast, a few of those other, I'll tell you, the ladies have us beat on child free communities, rightfully so. And it works, and they've got great communities. But child free men exist also. The census data that I quoted actually found there are more child free men than there are child free women. You wouldn't believe that based on the groups that are out there and some of the data. A lot of the books published are around the live childless life and all, and it's really important to women. But we don't talk about the same thing for men. I don't know why, but hopefully you and I can tackle some of that when we're doing these podcasts.
Yeah, that would be great. I think fundamentally, to call it out, you and I have very little to do with bearing children as men, so that probably has a decent amount to do with it. But yeah, we can definitely dive into those topics as this goes on. And maybe that's a good kind of segue into kind of what to expect from this podcast going forward, and what we might kind of see going forward. So the expectation here is that we're going to try to set out a podcast once a week, beginning today, which is August 1st. So we'll go once a week starting then. We're going to, probably have these conversations, hopefully target fairly quick. We don't want to have multiple hour sessions and discussions, even though we know between the two of us, we certainly could. We'll have to break them down into series and various episodes. But then, yeah, we're also have contact information. We really encourage people to get involved with the podcast, sending in questions. If you've got really unique stories or perspectives, we'd love to chat with you and maybe bring you on. But you can reach out to us at childfreepodcast@gmail.com and able to reach us directly there. Send in questions, topics that you'd like to hear us discuss, anything like that as well. And I think particularly to kind of, I don't know if we have explicitly called it out yet, but both Dr. J and myself are financial planners that focus on the child-free community. So a number of our discussions will be finance related, and we will kind of dive into some of those finance topics. But at the same time, as Dr. J mentioned, we're going to talk a lot of stuff like today where it's not really diving into the finances. We're talking about just the overall topic of being child-free. Maybe from our perspective, we can talk a bit more about how being a man and child-free is different from, well, I don't know if we can speak to how it is being a child-free woman, but our own perspective there. And so I think those are kind of the topics that we'll be getting into over the coming series from the podcast.
Yeah, and for the quiz question, for everybody watching or listening, there's a reason we launched it on August 1st. You may not know this, but August 1st is International Child Free Day. It's been around for years and it's kind of coming back. We're trying to talk about that more and say, okay, we exist. Go ahead and Google it. You'll see a lot of great history. They actually give out awards. We're recording this in advance, so I don't know who won this year, but congratulations to whoever it is. And, we as a community can grow and learn from each other.
Absolutely. Reach out to us. Let us know what you'd want to hear from us, and tune in next time as we'll continue to be covering very important topics for the child-free community as a whole. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be on our next podcast in a week. Thanks.